It was a humid Monday morning in Washington, D.C., and the air buzzed with tension. Outside the U.S. District Courthouse, a crowd had gathered: protesters, supporters, reporters, camera crews, all converging for one reason. Karoline Leavitt, the current White House press secretary under President Donald Trump, had been subpoenaed to testify in a highly publicized case regarding alleged executive overreach in a policy rollout involving interstate commerce regulations. At the center of this firestorm stood Judge Boasberg, a man known for his sharp tongue and partisan undertones despite the thin veil of judicial impartiality. Appointed years earlier, Boasberg had since become infamous in conservative circles for his perceived bias and pointed jabs at Trump administration officials. Today, it seemed he had set his sights on Leavitt. The courtroom was packed. Every seat taken. Every eyebrow raised. Leavitt entered wearing a simple but elegant navy blue pantsuit, flanked by two White House legal counsels. Her expression was calm but focused. At 31, she had become a powerhouse in the administration, articulate, unflinching, and beloved by Trump's base for her bold, unapologetic rhetoric. Boasberg's eyes narrowed slightly as he spotted her approaching the stand. As she raised her hand to swear the oath, he offered a thin smile. It wasn't welcoming, it was smug. "Let the record show," Boasberg said, adjusting his robe and peering down through his glasses, "that the White House press secretary has graced us with her presence. Though I'm curious how a spokesperson for the president qualifies as a policy expert. But we'll indulge the political theater for the cameras." Laughter stirred from the left side of the gallery, mostly from progressive activists and journalists. On the right, jaws clenched. Leavitt's eyes didn't flinch. She leaned forward slightly, microphone poised, and spoke with the kind of clarity only years of briefing room battles could hone. "Your Honor, I'm not here for theater. I'm here because your subpoena demanded it. And though I may not be an economist, I was tasked with communicating the administration's commerce directive and overseeing its public framework. If you wish to question the legality of a federal order, I recommend the Department of Justice. I represent the truth, not opinions." There was a hush. Even the court reporter paused. Boasberg leaned back, clearly irked. "Very clever, Ms. Leavitt. But we'll see if your truth holds up under scrutiny." The next hour unfolded like a boxing match, the judge's questions riddled with sarcastic inflections and loaded insinuations. He questioned her knowledge of constitutional limits, mocked her lack of a law degree, and even derided the Trump administration's communication style as a circus act performed nightly on cable news. Karoline, for her part, refused to be rattled. Each time he tried to trip her up, she parried with calm, well-articulated responses, frequently citing direct quotes from policy memos, legislative acts, and economic reports. Then came Boasberg's fatal mistake. "I find it fascinating," he said, with a smirk, "that someone who majored in communications now believes they're qualified to explain the intricacies of interstate commerce to a federal court. Remind me again, did you write your college thesis on TikTok influencers or late-night tweeting?" A sharp gasp echoed across the room. Even some of his own clerks looked uneasy. Leavitt smiled faintly, and for the first time, her voice dropped in tone, steady but filled with an unshakable authority. "No, Your Honor. But since you seem interested in my academic background, I'd be happy to submit my thesis, which was on media manipulation in judicial proceedings, specifically examining how courtroom rhetoric is used by judges to influence public narratives outside legal bounds. Ironically, you just offered me a fresh case study." Boasberg's face drained of color. The courtroom went silent again, only this time with palpable tension, not amusement. Leavitt had just turned the judge's condescension into a live example of judicial overreach. Cameras captured every second. Before Boasberg could respond, her attorney leaned into the mic. "Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to enter into the record a number of correspondences and internal court memos recently uncovered via FOIA request, which we believe speak directly to the political motivations behind this hearing." The judge blinked. "What memos?" Karoline folded her hands calmly. "We'll let the evidence speak for itself." The drama was far from over. A beat passed before the bailiff approached with a manila folder marked confidential, handed off by Leavitt's legal team. Inside were printed emails, internal notes, and calendar logs, all legally obtained through a recent Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) request. These documents weren't just any random bureaucratic chatter. They suggested something far more serious: prejudicial coordination between the judge's clerks and a political advocacy group known for its antagonism toward the Trump administration. Boasberg took the folder with a hint of disdain, his fingers momentarily trembling as he flipped through the pages. The courtroom, sensing the shift, leaned forward in their seats. Leavitt sat poised, her hands folded neatly on the table in front of her, watching without a hint of triumph. Her expression said it all. "You picked the wrong person to underestimate." One of her attorneys stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor, these memos contain communications between members of your staff and representatives of the Liberty Action Network, which has publicly pledged to bring down current Trump-era policies through judicial obstruction. These exchanges include suggested lines of questioning and talking points aimed specifically at Ms. Leavitt's credibility and background, including, disturbingly, references to her college major, her accent, and her media appearances." Gasps rippled across the room. Boasberg, his jaw tight, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "That's a serious accusation. I'll remind you that impugning the court without cause is grounds for contempt." "We're not impugning, Your Honor," the attorney replied firmly. "We're citing. And the cause is sitting right there in that folder. We also have digital records, timestamps, and witness affidavits, which we will gladly submit as evidence of coordination meant to stage today's hearing as a public humiliation rather than a legal inquiry." Karoline's second counsel, a seasoned former DOJ litigator, added, and under 28 U.S. Code Section 455, "We are formally filing a motion for Your Honor's recusal on the grounds of personal bias and impropriety." The air froze. A recusal motion? Against a sitting federal judge, mid-hearing, live in front of national media? This wasn't just bold. It was nuclear. Boasberg visibly stiffened, his eyes darting toward the press section, then toward his own clerks, several of whom were staring straight ahead, stone-faced, refusing to make eye contact. For the first time in the hearing, the judge said nothing. Not a witty retort. Not a smirk. Nothing. Leavitt calmly took her microphone. "Your Honor, I came here today to cooperate in good faith. I've testified truthfully, respectfully, and with full transparency. But I won't allow the office of the White House press secretary nor this administration to be used as props in a staged political spectacle. That isn't justice. It's performance. And the American people deserve better." The courtroom burst into a chaotic mixture of murmurs, camera shutters, and gasps. Reporters frantically typed, updated live feeds, and whispered into microphones. Boasberg, now red-faced, finally spoke, but his voice had lost its earlier bravado. We'll recess for 20 minutes while I review the documents and consider the motion." He banged his gavel with less certainty than before. As he retreated through the side door, a ripple of murmurs exploded throughout the gallery. On the right side, Leavitt's supporters stood in stunned admiration. A 31-year-old former news anchor from New Hampshire had just publicly checkmated a sitting federal judge on live television. Outside the courthouse, media vans were already cutting into programming. "Breaking news out of D.C." announced one national anchor. Karoline Leavitt just flipped the script on a courtroom meant to undermine her, and now a federal judge may be facing scrutiny of his own. Inside the break room behind the courtroom, Boasberg tore off his robe and sank into a chair. The documents he held weren't just embarrassing, they were damning. A paper trail of private messages, some even using court letterhead, coordinating public gotcha moments. This wasn't just a PR disaster. It was potentially a judicial ethics violation, and he knew it. The 20-minute recess stretched longer than expected. In the judge's chambers, Boasberg sat hunched over his desk, the folder of emails and memos spread out like evidence of a personal betrayal. He wasn't used to being on the defensive, least of all in a courtroom where he wielded absolute authority. His phone buzzed incessantly, texts from colleagues, advisors, and even a couple of discreet calls from his network of judicial peers. Whispers were already swirling about leaks and rumors of the impending recusal motion. The story had exploded beyond the courthouse walls in a matter of minutes. Meanwhile, back in the courtroom, Leavitt's team consulted quietly, confident but wary. They had struck a nerve, but they knew this fight was far from over. The optics were in their favor, yet the judge still had procedural control and plenty of allies behind the scenes. When Boasberg finally returned, the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Reporters jostled for position and the air was thick with anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Boasberg began, his voice tighter, more measured, "I have reviewed the documents submitted. While I vehemently deny any misconduct or collusion on my part or my staff, the appearance of bias is a serious matter. Therefore, I am recusing myself from this case." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. This was unprecedented. A federal judge, forced to step down mid-hearing due to evidence of political bias? It was a humiliating blow, one that would be dissected endlessly in legal circles and media outlets. Leavitt's face remained composed. She nodded respectfully toward the bench. As a representative of the American people, I appreciate the integrity this court now must restore, she said. Her attorney rose to formally accept the judge's recusal and motion the immediate reassignment of the case to a new, unbiased judge. Outside, news crews raced to capture reactions. The hashtag Boasberg recused began trending nationwide. Late-night talk shows preemptively scripted jokes. Conservative commentators hailed Leavitt as a champion who had exposed the judiciary's political games. But for Boasberg, the damage was personal and profound. Not only had his credibility been shattered, but the story also threatened to open investigations into his judicial conduct and possibly federal ethics violations. The White House, meanwhile, saw the moment as a political victory. In a brief press release, the president praised Karoline Leavitt for standing strong against judicial bullying and political grandstanding. The press secretary herself was suddenly catapulted into a new spotlight, hailed as a fearless defender of truth and fairness. Yet behind the scenes, the administration advised caution. They were winning the battle, but the war over judicial impartiality and executive power was far from over. The courtroom's emptying halls soon filled with a whirlwind of media frenzy. Reporters flooded the White House briefing room, eager for Karoline Leavitt's comments after her courtroom triumph. Cameras flashed as she entered, poised to face a barrage of questions, many eager to hear how she had stood up to a federal judge. Leavitt's opening remarks were measured but resolute. "This moment is not about me," she said. "It's about the principle that no one, not even a judge, should weaponize their position to degrade or politically attack a public servant performing their duty. Today, justice prevailed because truth and integrity cannot be silenced." Her words resonated deeply with many Americans who had grown weary of partisan judicial theatrics. Social media exploded with support, trending hashtags like #JusticeForLeavitt and #FairCourts. Talk radio hosts praised her sharp wit and unshakable composure. But not everyone was pleased. Within the judicial community, Boasberg's colleagues quietly debated the ramifications. Some sympathized, believing the judge had been pushed too far in a toxic political climate. Others quietly acknowledged that Boasberg had crossed ethical lines and now faced formal inquiries by the Judicial Conduct and Disability Committee. Leavitt's legal team, emboldened by their victory, prepared to submit formal complaints against Boasberg and his clerks, demanding transparency and accountability. This set the stage for a rare and intense investigation into judicial behavior and impartiality. Meanwhile, Boasberg retreated from the public eye. The press painted him as a fallen figure, once powerful, now vulnerable. His reputation was tarnished, and his chances of presiding over high-profile cases in the future dimmed significantly. The White House capitalized on the momentum, inviting Leavitt to speak at several prominent events highlighting judicial reform and accountability. She quickly became more than a press secretary. She became a symbol of resilience and unwavering dedication to democratic principles. However, Leavitt remained focused on the bigger picture. "This isn't just about one judge or one hearing," she said in a private conversation with her legal advisors. "It's about restoring faith in our institutions. We must ensure the courts remain a place of justice, not political theater." Her team began drafting proposals for legislation aimed at improving judicial transparency and preventing partisan interference in the courts, a bold move that threatened to reshape how America viewed the judiciary. The political fallout rippled across Washington. Members of Congress on both sides watched carefully. Some applauded the effort, while others criticized it as a direct attack on judicial independence. But the conversation was impossible to ignore. As for Boasberg, internal pressure mounted. The Judicial Council announced a preliminary hearing on his conduct, citing the leaked communications and their impact on public confidence in the judiciary. Faced with mounting scrutiny, the judge released a brief statement. "I regret any perception of bias and welcome the opportunity to clear my name through due process." The weeks following Judge Boasberg's recusal became a whirlwind of hearings, investigations, and national debate. The Judicial Conduct and Disability Committee held multiple sessions to examine the evidence, interviewing Boasberg's clerks, colleagues, and even the staff involved in the leaked communications. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt continued her public service with a newfound respect and influence. The White House officially endorsed the judicial reform bill she helped craft. a bipartisan effort aimed at increasing transparency and accountability among federal judges. The bill proposed stricter rules on judicial communications, conflict of interest disclosures, and established an independent review panel to oversee complaints against judges. Public opinion shifted decisively. Polls showed a majority of Americans supported these reforms, eager to restore faith in a system that many felt had been politicized and weaponized for personal agendas. In a nationally televised address, President Trump praised Leavitt's leadership and called for unity around the reforms. "We owe it to the American people to ensure our courts serve justice fairly and without bias," the president said. "Karoline's courage has shown us the way forward." As for Judge Boasberg, the investigation concluded with a formal reprimand and a suspension from presiding over new cases for 1 year. The reprimand, while not stripping him of his judgeship, effectively ended his career as a respected federal judge. Many legal experts speculated that his influence in Washington would never recover. In a final public statement, Boasberg expressed a mix of regret and defiance. "I acknowledge the concerns raised and apologize for any appearance of impropriety," he said. "I maintain my commitment to the rule of law and trust the judicial system will continue to serve the American people with integrity." For Karoline Leavitt, the ordeal was transformative. She emerged not only as a skilled communicator and press secretary, but as a symbol of resilience and justice in a deeply divided America. The courtroom confrontation had tested her mettle, but she had proven that courage and truth could prevail, even against powerful, entrenched forces. At a celebratory event in Washington, surrounded by supporters and colleagues, Leavitt reflected on the journey. "This fight was never about winning or losing," she said. "It was about standing up for what's right, defending the truth, and reminding everyone that justice must be blind to politics and prejudice." Her story inspired many, especially young women and aspiring public servants, to believe that no challenge was too great when faced with integrity and determination. And as the country moved forward, the echoes of that courtroom battle remained a reminder that democracy's strength lies not just in its institutions, but in the people brave enough to defend them.